Hey, what's going on, guys? I have a knife review for you today. Very excited about this one. This is probably the most influential folding knife in history. Of course, that's my opinion, but it certainly had a lot of firsts, and it definitely set a standard for folding knives that you see today. This is the Spyderco Worker. What's so special about this knife is this knife was the first folding knife ever to come out that had a pocket clip. This specific model is basically the invention of the pocket clip, which is such a standard today. Most folding knives do sport a pocket clip. Okay, so extremely innovative, extremely influential, and like I said, it set a standard. The other thing is having a hole or cutout in the blade to open it. Back then, by the way, this came out in 1981. That's what back then is. A lot of knives had nail nicks. It was very, very common for little lockback knives to have a small cutout in the tip of the blade by the spine, so basically a fingernail in there to assist in opening it, okay? There were thumb studs back then, also kind of a new idea, but no one has ever seen actually a cutout to be used in assisting the blade open. Okay, so in addition with that and the pocket clip, which is a brand new concept or idea, made this the first quote-unquote tactical knife. Now, a definition of a tactical knife could be quite diverse and very vague at times. Some people think tactical knives are very large knives that are black so they don't create glare, and they're used for sneaking up on people and slitting their throats before you storm their, castle for some kind of drug lord deal. Not necessarily the case. I think in a broad definition of a tactical knife would be basically a knife that you can operate with one hand. Okay, doesn't mean you have to do tactics with it. It just means that the knife is fully capable and very easily accessible to open, use, and close with one hand. Okay, I believe that was the original version or the original definition of a quote-unquote tactical knife. But this certainly was the first of its kind, and it's definitely set an open path for companies to create their own versions of this knife, and many have. In fact, every single knife company out there has a knife that mimics this, in that it at least has a pocket clip, okay? And most knives are easily accessibly opened with one hand. This was a huge deal back then, and to me, it's just such a piece of knife history. I absolutely love this thing. This is the Spyderco Worker, but there were a couple different versions. This specific model for this one is a C01P, has a plain edge blade, hollow ground, extremely fine clip point. Talk about that in a moment. And the steel on this is a GIN-1. Now, there were other versions. They had a special edition version of this knife that was, they used VG10 stainless. Obviously, this knife was made in Japan, if you didn't know, and a lot of Spyderco stuff was made over there. In fact, the GIN-1 idea was exclusively used by Sal Glesser and Spyderco, was not seen in any other folding knives in the industry at the time. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're the only company that ever did use GIN-1 predominantly for their folders. And the reason being was the idea of using, high-end Japanese steels at the time, and still to this day. GIN-1, GIN being short for Jingami, it's made by Hitachi Steels, and it was used in kitchen cutlery. Okay, Sal Glesser saw, Japan, Seki City, Japan, which again, another staple for awesome knives, awesome steel, high quality stuff. He saw this this opportunity to take something that was used as an industry high-end standard for kitchen cutlery and bring it over to the folding world. He said, well, if people, these great chefs around the world are using these fine knives in the kitchen to prepare food, why can't we have that in our pocket for a daily user? And that's exactly what he did. And at the time, and for many years to come, he was the only company to use GIN-1. GIN-1 is it's hard to really compare it to something of today. In using this knife, and yes, I did EDC this and carry it. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, because I was really worried about that fine tip, but I didn't baby it, even though I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to snap off. It didn't, but I promise I didn't hold back using this knife. But anyway, it's hard to compare to something today. If I really had to, I would say it's very close to maybe a 154 cm. Something in that range. It does have a very fine grain structure, this steel. 0.9% carbon, 15.5% chromium. And there were obviously other versions of the Jinami line. GIN-2 was also very popular a couple years later. But as far as this blade is concerned, it's very funky. Overall, the knife, I think the knife's ugly. It's so rich in history, I had to have one, but overall, I don't think it's a good looking knife, but it's certainly very functional. And this is the kind of thing that a lot of people had with Spyderco for many years. You know, Spyderco, in the beginning, at least in the early 90s, it was kind of a cult following in that people who liked them loved them, just swore by them. But for a long time, a lot of people just thought they were ugly. They could not get past the fact that they just did not look like great knives. They looked weird. I mean, the Delica, you know, the Enduras, they look like weird knives. The Spyderco Native, a lot of the early models, people didn't like because of the looks. But over time, when people started handling them, they, you know, started getting passed around in the knife community, and people, you know, grew to love how useful they were. Their designs weren't necessarily focused on looks. They were more focused on functionality. And they were amazingly good performing knives. And eventually they grew and grew and grew. And look at today. The majority of knife reviews on YouTube are of Spyderco knives. I have to say they have to be, by far, the most popular brand talked about on YouTube. Okay, and of course you carry that over to the forums. There's plenty of other talk of other knives on the forums, but as far as, you know, knife reviews go on YouTube or even knife videos at all, you hear about Spyderco a lot. That's why it's so refreshing when you hear about other things, different brands that people aren't always exposed to. You hear about a new Spyderco, yeah, you get excited because you know it's gonna be a cool knife, or at least you assume it's gonna be a cool knife, but you're kind of like, okay, another Spyderco, I get it. But this is a little blast from the past. I wanted to do a review on this one because it is so rich in history, and I have such an interest in this one. It was one of my grail knives, something I just had to have. I did want to actually carry it and use it. I didn't want to baby it. I did just that. I'm actually very surprised to find that the tip did not snap. Now, something I also realized is that when you do see these for sale, it's kind of rare to see one with a snap tip. Like any person, you could abuse your knife. You could not appreciate what it is. You know, back in the early 80s, they weren't incredibly hard to find. They were in production, obviously, and so it wasn't that big of a deal. But you really don't see them that damaged. When you do see them for sale, they look like they're in okay condition. And even when they're all beat up and all scratched, they usually still have that tip. It's just such a fine tip. It's very surprising. So we have a clip point style blade here, and we also have a sharpened swedge. Let me get the old jeweler's loop. We'll come in nice and close here. Take a look at this. Get a close-up shot. First, let's focus best we can, and then come in here. You can see how fine the tip is on this. It is almost needle sharp. There's very, very few knives out there that come to more of an acute point. But the big deal with this is that from the factory, you had a sharpened swedge. Okay? Very effective, and also by design, any knife that has a sharpened swedge, you want that blade to be fully enclosed in the handle, so obviously when the knife is closed, you're not going to cut yourself, so it is not exposed. Okay, another great example of a knife design or folding knife design with a swedge you could sharpen is the Gerber Applegate Fairbane folders. And I've done a video on that. They never came sharpened from the factory, but you can sharpen them up and have a good option for a stiletto style knife. Now, when I say stiletto, that doesn't look like a stiletto to most people. By definition, a stiletto is a blade, the blade shape or style anyway. One side is sharpened and a portion of the back is sharpened, as opposed to a dagger. A dagger is a fully double-edged blade. It doesn't necessarily describe the shape of the knife overall. It's more specific to the sharpened portions of the blade. So stiletto, one side sharpened, a portion of the back side sharpened, and dagger, fully sharpened on both sides, okay? Serrated or plain doesn't make a difference. Those are just general terms, more specifically used in legal definitions as opposed to a physical definition of the knife. But regardless, it's extremely pointy, extremely sharp. With use on this. Now, when I first got this, it was okay. It had a nice edge on it, but I did sharpen up just slightly, and I did strop it. Carried this for about 2.5 weeks daily, used it as I normally would. And then after that, I did a little bit of extra testing just to see how that tip would handle, and it's been fine ever since. With a lot of use on it, I'll give you a quick little cut test. Well, it doesn't say a whole lot about the knife because you take any knife and sharpen it up, but as you can see here, it's still nice and sharp, even after some EDC use on this blade. And the tip is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, it really takes no effort at all to pierce through things, okay? And of course, once it's in, it rips like crazy. If I use the back, okay, the sharpened swedge portion tears more than it does cut, but it's certainly sharp enough to do the job. If you had to use this defensively, being so acute and so pointy, and that's acute, not cute. I think the knife's quite ugly. It's not cute at all. But yes, just being so narrow, let's just say, as a more descriptive term, it is kind of like a needle nose. I was quite surprised that with normal EDC use, it did not snap off. I really had a feeling it would. But you know, if you're using this to open boxes, it's very, very simple to do because, again, as mentioned in past videos, no matter how sharp your blade is, the first thing that goes into the box is the tip. Okay, so if you have a blunted tip, or if you're using, say, a survival style blade with like a sheep's foot, a heavy sheep's foot, it's going to be a hard or difficult style blade to work with EDC because you want to pierce the box first before you cut across. I mean, I guess it more depends on your technique of opening boxes, but with that specifically, this passed through very, very easily. And in some cases, I actually just flipped it around like so and used the somewhat sharpened swedge to rip the tape open as opposed to cut into the cardboard. So if you want to save your edge, you can just use the swedge all the time for opening boxes. So it's an interesting concept for use. Stainless steel body, so the whole thing is one big hunk of metal. No plastic here, nothing you know, kind of chintzy or cheap or anything like that. It has a good solid feel. After all these years, 1981 till today, this thing still locks up perfectly. There is not a single, you know, even a suggestion of blade play on this in any direction whatsoever. It is a lockback, as you can see here, and we have a really nice match on the spine here, where the base of the spine locks up with that lock bar. It's a nice, even, straight line. That's what gives us our perfect lockup. Okay, you can see the Spyderco, the old style logo before they put on their gold in Colorado and earth. And on the reverse, Seiki City, Japan, or just Seiki, Japan. All right, you will also notice that there's a hidden tang pin on this. It's not, you can't take it apart, it's not adjustable or anything like that. That's what's so amazing, just the quality and workmanship in this knife, is that after all these years of use, there is no blade play and it's not an adjustable pivot. We have the accessibility. Most knives today do have adjustable pivots. They're, you know, basically kind of pumped out in machines and factories and stuff like that, but they make them so that if they do get loose, you can easily fix them. These old knives from the 80s and 90s, a lot of them were constructed like this, where if you got some wiggle in your blade, oh well, your blade's used, it wiggles. There's nothing you can do about it. But after all these years, it's a true test to its quality. Obviously the blade, you know, does have a pin. It's pivoting on something, right? Just like a lot of the old Benchmade balisongs, what they do is once they assemble the knife and they start sanding down the sides and buffing it up, it kind of gets lost in there. But you can see both pins, not just the pivot pin, but also the pin on the towards the spine right here, which is what your lock bar is pivoting on, okay, to give you that lock back. So take a look at that real quick. Come in nice and close. You can see there's the pin. As I tilt it, you can see basically a faint circle. And talk about a perfect fit. That's what our lock bar pivots on. And here is our very shiny view. Let that focus again for a second. Yeah, there we go. All right, come in close. Take a look at that one more time. Hard to see. I got a bad glare with the light overhead. Yeah, right, come on. You guys get it, I know you do, but now it's kind of annoying. I have to show it. Let's see if I can do it without the loop. Such a glare. You could see it there, it's just, it's faint. Let me do this so I can kind of hide that glare a little bit better. All right, you get it, it's there. So, just an awesome knife, very strong. They don't make them like they used to. You know, there's such a fascination these days with strong lockup. You know, we're trying to make folding knives into fixed blades, and it's just impossible. We'll continuously come up with new designs and new things to make, bigger and badder locks, and you can hang 4,000 pounds off it without it bending. That's all great and everything, but nothing will compare to a fixed blade. Fixed blade is just that. It's one hunk of steel that will not break. When you're talking about folders, you're talking about multiple parts, and there will always be a weakness in a folder, okay? But even this simple design, very, very simple design, it's still used today. Why? Because it works. And after all these years, this thing locks up perfectly, okay? And you can actually use it. So I don't know what the obsession is with these master locks, and you're making folding knives like, half-inch thick blade stocks, and I mean, they're just getting beefier and chunkier and stronger. It's not necessary. A folding knife has its specific uses as a folding knife. That could be for a whole different video, but I just figured I'd throw it in this one just to mention that, hey, there's a knife from the early 80s and it's still kicking nice and strong. You can get knives, even slip joints from 1910, and they still work fine as pocket knives, because that's what they are. They're pocket knives. You want something that's gonna be a better, harder use, get yourself a fixed blade. It's about using the right tool for the job, right? But anyway, we do see a lanyard hole, which again, although not, it was in the market at the time, it was still kind of a rare feature. Also, in addition to the clip, which by the way, as you can tell here, this is only a tip down carry position here, and it's not swappable. We all know Spyderco today to be one of the few companies to offer pretty much every one of their models has an option to flip-flop your clips, with a few exceptions, but generally speaking, they will have 4 mounting positions for the clip, so you have more versatility in carrying the knife. Anyway, it's a very nice knife. I like it. Overall size is, I think it's perfect for EDC. I like big blades because they're cool. But as far as EDC knives, you don't really need much more than maybe a 3 or 4 inch blade. In this specific case, we're talking 2 3/4 inches. Again, that GIN-1, very nice steel. If I had to compare, it's hard because it's its own steel, but if I had to compare it to anything, again, maybe a 154 cm. Closed 3 7/8 inches overall, and the overall length is 6.5 inches. So it's a great little pocket knife. I know a lot of people will be turned off by that extremely pointy blade and think that that's going to give them a problem, but if you're using your knives properly, it's not going to be an issue. It's just like talking about guns with a really light trigger pull. You know what? It's not an issue if your finger's not on the trigger when you don't mean to shoot things. Same with fine tips. Use them properly. If you dig this into something and twist and turn and pull and poke, using a knife like this, yeah, sure, you'll probably snap that tip off. Is that the blade's fault? Nope. You got a fine knife like this, don't do that. Okay, cut like this. Cut slow, take your time. Don't abuse your knives and they won't fail on you. But anyway, very cool. Only drawbacks to this one I would say is, first of all, very hard to find, and the price is all over the place. Because it's been discontinued, it came out in 1981. All right, they're out there. You can find them if you want. You can find them on the forums. You can find them on eBay. They're not so rare that no one has them. The problem with them is the prices are all over the place, and the market dictates that. There's been times where I see these sell for $300 to $400 a piece. However, if you really watch these places like the forum sales sections and eBay, you watch it like a hawk, you will get deals. Someone had just messaged me about 2 or 3 days ago, and they picked up one of these. I think it was, I want to say it was the one with the fully serrated blade. I'm sorry. It was a plain edge one, and I think the description was Spyderco Boy Scout knife. So apparently maybe they happen to own one back in the Scouts, or maybe their dad did, whatever the case is, but they happen to find one, and they won it at auction for $28 and change. You cannot beat that. So you know who you are, who sent me a message right here in the video. I will give you a big congratulations. Deal of the day. Probably deal of the week and deal of the year. But you just never know. So I can't even give you an estimate of what to expect to pay for these. It's basically when you find one, if you want it, whatever price it is what you're going to have to pay. You want to wait a little bit longer, try to get something cheaper, by all means do so. But they're not making any more of these. And it's just like old cars, over the years, more and more will be destroyed, more and more will get lost, and less will be available for sale, and the price will go up and up. So, get them while you can if it's something that's interesting to you. As far as just, get one for daily user, if you happen to get one for $28 like the other person did, then by all means, use it, enjoy it, love it. If you're one of these people that end up paying a couple $100 for it, you may want to put it in a display case and save it for a good knife story. It's a great conversation piece, but only for people who care about knives. Anyone else is going to look at it like it's some Chinese knife, they're not going to care. But if I happen to come over, I will certainly notice it in your display case, and I would love nothing more than to have a chat about it. So, anyway, that's it. Definitely a piece of knife history. Love this knife. It is a good performing knife, and all these years later, with all the advancements we have, and lock technology and steel and titanium frame locks are just the thing. If you don't have a titanium frame lock knife with the latest and greatest steel, then you are a loser. Well, I would beg to differ. Blast from the blast. Blast from the blast. Yeah. And I don't drink. I promise. Anyway, my point is that, back then they made awesome knives and they're still working today. Nothing wrong with it. And I guarantee there's a couple of people out there who bought one back in 1981, still has it, still uses it, still loves it. So, very influential knife. And I guarantee whatever you have in your pocket right now was based off of this one. So, good job, Spyderco. Good job, Sal Glesser. And you've really created something nice with your company. And, the thousands of models that come out since. Little tidbit, I read in multiple places that Sal has one of every knife ever made. Spyderco's. I believe he takes the very first production one, when they come out with a new model. Since the beginning, whenever they created a new design, I've heard that he'll take the very first one off the line and put it in his collection. So that's very impressive. I would love nothing more than to see that collection. That would be very, very cool to be a crap load of models that I don't even remember. Because even if you follow knives very closely, there's just too many. There's too many companies, too many models, too many versions of each model. You can't remember all of them. So occasionally you'll see one pop up and you're like, wow, I didn't know they had that option back then, or that handle style, or that blade, or whatever. Maybe that's just the model itself. You're like, holy crap, I don't remember that one. There's a lot of knives out there. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you happen to have a Spyderco worker, by all means, make a video, post as a video response. I will accept it. We will all watch it, and we will enjoy it. So for now, hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you soon. Take it easy, guys.